Welcome to the HR Champions podcast with me, Phil Scott of HR Recruit, where I bring you leaders from the HR community. In our podcast, we'll be discussing their careers today, their passion for HR, and the challenges they face along the way. Today, I'm delighted to introduce Natasha Hanson, who has recently finished as Business Services and HR Director at Direct Rail Services Limited. Natasha is a big believer in ED&I, and I'm delighted to have her on the show today. So, Natasha, I'm going to hand it over to you. If you just give the listeners a quick introduction to who you are.
Hi, thanks for inviting me along, Phil. Yeah, my name's Natasha Hanson. I was the HR and Business Services Director, as you say, at Direct Rail Services. They are a wholly owned subsidiary of the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority. And my time with the NDA and with Direct Rail Services, I was there around about 10 years, just over 10 years. And did a variety of different things, from working at corporate centre right through to hands-on operational HR role.
Fantastic, thank you. And let's start at the beginning of your career. And if you can just tell the listeners how you first got into HR.
I kind of fell into HR. I was working in recruitment. I worked for an organisation which still exists today called Reed, and I was recruiting temporary secretaries in Birmingham. And I really, really loved it. I was very good at it, and I was very good at the kind of part where you have to solve problems when they came in with a pay query, or they came in with they wanted to move because they weren't getting on very well with people. And I wasn't just good at the sales part of it. I was good at making sure the right person was placed in the right organisation. And then my husband, as is now, boyfriend as was then, was headhunted for a job in the Northwest, and I moved up with Reed. And didn't really like the move. The office wasn't as well organised. It wasn't as slick as Birmingham. And I had an opportunity, really. It was to stay in recruitment and do more of the same, but for somebody else, or to really focus on the HR element, the people element of that. And that's what I decided to do. And I joined a textile company called Intex Yarns. They're not there anymore, sadly. It's a long time ago. But Intex Yarns, I joined as the HR manager, and they were just brilliant with me. They supported me. They were a highly unionized environment, but they took you through all of the policies and procedures, hand-holding to make sure that you didn't make any kind of massive gaffes. And also they supported me through what was then my IPM, what's now CIPD, to make sure that I was fully qualified to be able to deliver what I did. And I just went from there, just from strength to strength. I was there about 3 years, and then I moved to Coates Viella, and then into engineering, building, civil engineering, kind of more regulated, more what I call dirty industry from there, and I've continued on in that vein ever since.
And what is it you like particularly about working in HR?
I like the fact that you can make a difference by doing just some very simple, very straightforward, very sensible approaches. I find that if you treat people as human beings, they respond well to that, and they end up showing you a considerable amount of loyalty, and the loyalty that you get to your business resonates with the customers, and therefore you become a good place to work as a result of it. So that's what I probably like most about working in HR, making a difference by doing simple things.
And your career has progressed pretty steadily. Have there been any achievements that have stood you in good stead?
Yeah, I became a HR director at the age of 31. I joined a building and civil engineering company, and not only was I the first female director that they had, I was the first woman manager of any sort that they'd ever had there. And I kind of didn't realize how significant that was. I embraced that opportunity and took it forward with both hands, and made everything that I could from it. And it taught me about how to run a business. It taught me that it wasn't just as simple as hiring and firing people and training them while they were there and making sure they got paid, that there was a lot more to do with it. And it stood me in great stead to transfer those HR skills that I had, plus the newly found business leaders skills I had, to a variety of different organisations, and I think to me it was a defining moment in my career.
Fantastic. And have you always just stuck to HR, or do you get out and about wider operationally within the businesses?
As my most recent job title would suggest, HR and business services, it means that I have kind of widened my business leadership skills. So in my last role, I looked after ICT, including telecoms. I looked after communication, stakeholder engagement. I looked after the corporate services, so that's the admin that supports how the business operates. And I set up a training academy as well. So if I was just to go back to the director's post that I had initially in my early 30s, I learned an awful lot from that I've been able to translate into other things that I've done at work. One of my very strong values is around actually getting out and talking to the people that I work with. And that means going out operationally to the sharp end where things are happening. And actually just working with people. So at Direct Rail Services, I introduced some of the executive team to being the apprentice's apprentice and going out working with people in the engineering department, donning orange overalls, getting a spanner in our hands and getting underneath some locomotives to help while the apprentices learnt what they were doing. And what that enabled us to do was to actually find out what issues some of the decisions that we were making as senior managers were causing right the way down at the business, almost to get the opportunity to say, how does this impact you? Is it as good as we thought it was? Because people in the rail industry are very much passionate about what they do. They're not the sort of people that go to work, don't tell you what's going on, don't tell you how they feel about the work. They actually believe passionately in the railway, and therefore they're always willing to tell you how you could do or help them do their job better. And to me, that's a massive honor that you have, whereby if somebody tells you something, you have the opportunity to help the business by doing it, but also help those people as individuals.
Fantastic. And how did you first then take on wider responsibilities? So you mentioned in your last role ICT, telecoms, etc. Was that just in your last position, or have you taken on wider responsibilities earlier? What I'm trying to get is a lot of people in HR want to broaden their horizons and their skill set. So how did you manage it?
I have to say that my most recent job is not the only time that I've taken on additional responsibility. And I, like a lot of people, as you've just described in HR, thought, blimey, I'm a really good leader. I can do a little bit more. I found the best way to get into that was to volunteer on projects. So volunteer, bring the skills that you currently have in HR, which are general management, they just happen to be focused on a people solution, and actually work as part of a project team. So I did that when I worked in textiles. I did it when I worked in engineering. I did it when I worked for BA Systems. Always have in mind that you have more to give and be the first to step forward when there's some volunteering needed. Project work gives you exposure to other functions and other parts of the organization that you might not normally get. And what you can do is you have the opportunity to shine as part of that, to say, I've shown you I can deliver from a people perspective, let me have a go at that. And normally people are, or my experience is that my line manager was always very keen to support me. Maybe I was just really good at blagging, who knows, but certainly I was always very well supported by a line manager who kind of acted almost like a coach for me as part of that, to say, how are you going to solve these problems? How are you going to make sure that if I have faith and trust in you and put you forward, that you're gonna make it work? And to be fair, I'm reluctant to say I was lucky, because you know what they say, you're only as lucky as how much work you put in. But I was quite lucky. I was lucky with the businesses that I chose to work for. I was lucky with the line managers that I worked for, and I was lucky insofar as I worked really hard and did a really good job and was recognized for it. And then people are much more likely to give you the opportunity to do something else.
Fantastic. And just going on to your previous company, you mentioned Direct Rail Services were part of the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority. What's the connection there between railways and nuclear? Just
that's a really good question. Well, obviously the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority decommission nuclear materials. So basically they're clearing up the nuclear legacy as required under the Energy Act. And that was put in place by a Labour government many years ago to deal with all the things that essentially hadn't really been touched or tackled appropriately since the 1940s. How Direct Rail fit into that is they're a wholly owned subsidiary, and their primary reason for being is to move nuclear materials on the railway. But it's not quite that simple, because you have to, people who use the rail network have to have a certain level of competence and have to keep that competence up all the time. And the amount of work there is moving nuclear material on the railway would not do that. So Direct Rail Services also provide commercially based contracts. They do what's called intermodal. Basically, they move other types of goods for supermarkets, for manufacturers, from ports to the consumer, and actually do it really, really well. So much so that they've won a number of safety and reliability awards, something called the Golden Whistle, which if you're not in the rail industry, you wouldn't know about it, but it's really prestigious, and they won it 7 years in a row simply by being really, really good at what they do, from the point of view of delivering on time, delivering safely, as you would hope from a nuclear-based company, but delivering on a scale that a lot of the other rail freight companies just look up to and admire.
And I know you've mentioned to me Direct Rail Services was heavily unionised environment. I mean, what are the difficulties of working in a unionised environment?
That's a really good question. I think lots of people get very intimidated when they hear the word union. I like to view unions as another communication channel. They're a group of people representing their members, but who hear things that you as in the leadership team might not hear. So I'm not always terribly kind of intimidated by what they do. Yes, I've had my battles, but my experience is if you're open and honest about what you can be open and honest about, you will find that you get a lot of engagement and a lot of buy-in from your people. To me, communication, and by communication I don't just mean sitting down and having meetings, but actually listening to what's being told to you by people who are essentially the experts in what they do. They're the people that are running the business on your behalf. If you listen to them and then take action, the most important thing is actually do something with the information that you've got. I think that you can have a very, very positive relationship. And I was delighted that when I was announced that I was leaving Direct Rail Services, that one of my union colleagues actually said to me that if he was to ever return to train driving, that the only company that he would want to work for was Direct Rail Services, because of the work that we'd put in there, because of the interventions that we'd done, because of our listening, because of our action where it was needed. We made it a really great place to work.
Great. And you've got a passion for ED&I, so yeah. I'll ask you to, for the layman who doesn't know that acronym, but I mean, talk to me about about that passion.
Okay, so firstly, ED&I stands for Equality, Diversity and Inclusivity. And I'm really passionate about the last two letters, the diversity and inclusivity. And by that, I mean, I'm looking for a diversity of thought. I'm looking for people who come from different backgrounds and have different life experiences to come and to share them with you and to be included in the decision making that's happening in the business. because of that, I've introduced a number of policies and procedures over the years that are focused on particularly around family-friendly and flexible working. A long time before the current pandemic and all the requirements to work from home, Direct Rail Services put in place a number of initiatives to enable people to work from home. And that's from things like putting in place the right IT. We had WebEx a long time before Zoom was even heard of, to make sure that people could actually operate effectively where they needed to. And what had the consequences of doing is it enabled us to dip into a wider pool of candidates, because some people might have had caring responsibility or childcare responsibility, or not being able to travel as far as other people. And we found a way to work with those to make sure that they were suitable, that they had suitable skills, but also that we made a suitable environment for them to work in. I also put together things like family-friendly paternity and parental leave. Basically, what we did is we treated the second partner, male or female, who was sharing maternity leave as if they were a woman, and paid them as such. So people weren't taking time off with statutory pay, they were taking time off as if they were on full pay. And what that enabled people to do was obviously to make a commitment to their family when a new member was joining them, but it also had the intended but unintended consequences of when a line manager was interviewing, instead of using their own sadly unconscious biases, that a woman of childbearing age might sit down in front of them, and they might be thinking, oh, well, I'm not sure if I'm going to take her on, you know, she might leave and have a baby. And yes, those thoughts still do go on, I'm sure, in lots of organizations. By putting together family friendly policies that removed that bias, what that meant was if any candidate of any gender sat down in front of somebody, they were then thinking, who's the best person for the job? Because anybody could take the paid time off to when a new member of the family joined the family. So it was a really, really positive way of making sure that more people were included, more people, you had a much more diverse workforce than you would normally have, and things were a whole lot more equal.
That's interesting, and you probably had a wider pool of candidates as well if you'd already adopted the remote working.
Yeah, most definitely, and also word soon gets out that you're an employer that people want to work for, and therefore your staff are really keen that their family and friends come and work for you, because it's a really good place to work. But also people in the wider communities where your businesses are based hear about you, and suddenly it becomes from the point of view where, when I first went to Direct Rail Services, they had an attrition rate of somewhere in the region of 70% in a particular skill set, and by the time I left they had less than 7% attrition in that area. And that's because values had been kind of hardwired into the businesses. We hadn't simply talked a good game, we'd actually delivered what we said we were going to do from that perspective. And suddenly people wanted to either stay with us or they wanted to join us, and it became a really we didn't need to do too much. I mean, we improved our recruitment processes as part of that as well. But actually, our people became our best ambassadors. And if there were any vacancies, suddenly they were, you know, my friend Bill wants to join us, my daughter Jo wants to join us, or whatever. And it became very easy to make sure that you had people that wanted to work for you. And also by those people recommending people, they're putting their own credibility on the line, and they only want you to come and work with them if you have similar vision, similar values, similar work ethics, because they don't want to invite somebody along who's not going to pull the weight. So it was actually a really good thing to do. Just put your money where your mouth is, live by your values, and a business becomes very easy to run as a result.
Yeah, I'm sure we've all had it where you've been asked if you know anyone and you think, I do actually, but
yeah, I'm not going to recommend them. Well, you do, but it also makes you think, oh, actually, I know X. They'd be really good. I wonder if they'd come, and you've talked about it over dinner, or you've talked about it in the pub, and you go in at when pubs used to be open on a Friday night after work, and you're so enthusiastic about what you do that it kind of brings people on, because it's like, I work for this company and we do this, and I'm not coming in here to drink my sorrows, I'm coming in here to celebrate my week. It's been so good, we've done this, we've done that, we've done the other. So yeah, it can be a really good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And CSR, the last business you worked for, were quite big on corporate social responsibility. Just talk me through the different types of initiatives they did.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Corporate social responsibility, from my perspective, is just a gift to an organization. And it's a gift to an organization because firstly, it's a really cost-effective way to develop your people. People are happy to volunteer, and they get so much out of it as individuals by doing that. But what it also does, and I know a lot of organizations do this as well, we weren't unique from that perspective, but we gave 5 paid days a leave off every year for people to volunteer locally, nationally, or internationally. And what that does is it raises your profile. It enables your people to give to charities or give to initiatives that they love and that they find value in. And as I say, it's a really cost-effective way to deliver that. Your people give of their time. It might be something as like tidying up and planting flowers at a local railway station. It might be some of the things that I was involved in, which was I volunteered overseas in Kerala in India, where I went for 3 weeks using some of my annual leave to volunteer on a women's empowerment program. And to say it's life-changing, it might sound a bit kind of dramatic and, oh my God, this woman is, just in cloud cuckoo land, but it really was life-affirming, where you saw the little bit that you were giving and what a massive difference it made to people's lives. So myself and my former line manager, Debbie, we volunteered together, and literally we taught English in the corner of an office to local women who, although India now has both genders being educated at school, they have a whole tranche of women who missed out when education was predominantly male orientated. And these women are simply looking for some help to better their skills in English, better their letter writing skills, better their Microsoft Word skills, so that they can get a better job to help support their families. And we were able to give them some very basic skills that we take for granted, like how to lay out a Word document, and to do that with a class of 12 or 14 people using 2 computers. We were able to kind of bring that all because our employer saw the value of letting us have 5 paid days off. And then of course we brought back the skills that we'd learned, saw that we could do so much more back in our own organization, back in our own communities with that, and it becomes a really positive catalyst for other people to say, oh, Natasha talked about that looks really interesting to do. I wonder if I can do that. I wonder if they'd let me go and do that for this charity, or that for this thing that's really important to me. And suddenly it makes it a really fun, empowered place to work. And who wouldn't want to work there? Who why wouldn't you want to?
No, I can certainly understand that. If part of your job you're allowed to go and follow your passion as well, it's a big box ticked.
It brings back so many skills that people weren't expecting. So in my spare time, the little spare time I have, I volunteer as well for this organisation I just talked about. They're called Global Vision International, GVI. And as part of that, I'm going to Laos later on this year, if Boris lets me, to teach English to novice Buddhist monks. Because in Laos, one of the places that people are able to get free education is if they give some time to a religious community, and that way they can get some volunteers there to teach English. what I've then done to support myself going on that volunteering is I've gained a teaching skill, something called a CELTA, which is a internationally recognized qualification for teaching English as a second language to adults. And what that will do is, firstly, it's made me a much better trainer when I'm back in the HR community. Some of the things that I see people do in training sessions now, I put my head in my hands thinking, oh my God, my tutor at my teaching course would have said, no, don't do that. Don't give the handouts while you're trying to explain stuff. Just some really little things that I did in my own time that make me better at work. So my employer benefits always from just simply from those 5 days of letting me have time off.
We could talk all day about some of those initiatives, if I'm honest, but time permitting. So I'm going to bring it back to you as an individual. Give me 3 people who've been influential to you.
This is a really tough one, because when I start looking at how I'm influenced by so many people. You know, I'm influenced by the older apprentice who gave up a really steady job in the engineering stalls to become an apprentice engineer. I'm really inspired by things like that. I'm really inspired by the female freight driver who's the only one in Scotland who has taken the time out, who moved from the post office for her passion to drive locomotives, and I'm inspired by people like that. But if I look at who's inspired me most in my career, which line managers or which senior people have kind of helped me up and lifted me up, I can easily think of 3 people. I think of a guy called Bill, who was the chief executive when I worked in textiles in the organization I worked with, and he had a real way of making you believe that the vision and the strategy that he and the senior leadership team had come up with were your idea. And to have that skill, that, you know, he obviously he was telling us things, but his style wasn't such that you felt like you were told. You felt like you had come up with it yourself, that it was your vision to live and breathe. So I was really, really inspired by him. I was really inspired by a woman called Kathy, who was the chair at East Lancashire Primary Care Trust, where I was a non-exec director on their board for 6 years. And she was really, really inspirational, because she taught me about treating people as people. And one of the things that she did is she invited members of the public into the board meeting. The board meetings were held in public anyway, but members of the public weren't allowed to participate. They were only allowed to listen. But she invited people in so that you got a real flavour of the decisions that you'd made and how they impacted that member of the public, whether they were a patient, whether they were a carer, whether they were a parent of a patient, and it was, to me, it was a real eye-opener to see how to be a HR person, or a person who had a HR background, and actually really understand how to treat people as human beings. It has been really one of my guiding principles from that time forward. And lastly, I'd choose my most recent line manager, a lady by the name of Debbie at Direct Rail Services. Debbie was the managing director there, and Debbie showed me that it's possible to do a difficult job and to have a lot of fun while you're doing it. We all spend an awful lot of time at work, and work can be something that drags us down, engulfs us sometimes. So it was really refreshing for nearly 4 years to go every day to work and have a really good time. And that's not to say that we didn't work really hard, because we did, but we also made sure that people understood that if you worked hard, that you could also have a really nice working environment. It doesn't have to be, you know, where you get up every day and you dread going to work. It could be somewhere that you actually enjoy going to.
And when you rise to the top, there's not always as many line managers who do the same discipline as you to learn from. How do you learn? What personal development do you do?
I do loads of things. So you know, it's one of those great cliches that people say, oh, you should network really well. You really should network really well. I'm a part of a Women Leading in Business group. I'm a part of Women in Rail, Women in Nuclear. I network with anybody and everybody, and as part of that, I've just been invited to be a judge on the National Rail Awards because of how I network with people. People know me in the industry, people know my experience. So my first thing would be to network. The second thing I would say is read lots. Read Harvard Business Review, read the latest business book, and if you don't have time to read the whole book, get the summary. You can register for, you know, a 5-page summary of the key learnings in current business thinking. Read or listen to podcasts of, like this one, of the thinkers of this time. You know, people like Simon Sinek, who make what's happening in the world of business very simple to understand, who bring it down to the point where you have light bulb moments. I would also say get close to your union colleagues as a great way to develop yourself. Unions train their reps really, really well on current employment law. Get involved with them, get involved with ACAS. ACAS runs some really cost-effective learning that you can tap into. Get yourself along to breakfast meetings that your solicitors might run on employment law changes. You know yourself, HR changes tend to come April and October, and somebody always does a breakfast meeting to update you on what the current changes are coming. And I would say talk to people that you respect, people that you know, people that perhaps aren't in your industry. Network at every opportunity. Post on LinkedIn, post about what you've learned with some of the other things I suggested as development, and ask people's opinion. You might not always like what you hear, but you'll always get a response from that. And it's a great way to kind of get another person's point of view on something that you might have seen as really black and white. And suddenly they're able to give you the grey shades as part of it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'd agree with that networking. I mean, I think we might have mentioned before the guild group that we've got with a few hundred HR people, and they're asking each other questions all the time, and you know, it's great to see such collaboration going on. So another question for you: have you in your career hit any setbacks, and if so, how did you overcome them?
Yeah, when I was thinking about this, when we talked briefly earlier on, the one setback that I always think of is I made the wrong choice over an employer, and I moved them and stayed with them 7 long months, and it was what it taught me was how important it is to do your due diligence, and how important it is to remember that in the recruitment process, not to get carried away and get really flattered by the fact that somebody's offering you a job. Remember that it's a two-way thing, and if you don't allow that kind of, oh my God, they love me moment to be defining. You have to love them too, and make sure that whatever you've done to find out about that organization stands you in good stead. I mean, even if you have done that due diligence, there's you know, sometimes things aren't, you know, people aren't as honest as they could be as part of the recruitment process. But if you've done your due diligence well and remembered that it's a two-way process, I think you can't go far wrong. That's certainly what it taught me.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I was chatting to somebody, it was yesterday actually over email, and she was turning down a job because they had 95% negative reviews on Glassdoor.
Yeah, and you know, things like that are really important nowadays. It's, you know, it's not only important to read them, but it's also important when you're working there and you love them to post something good if you want to be an employer of choice. So yeah, no, it's really important. Just remember, two-way thing. Absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. And what advice would you have to anyone, maybe if they're starting out in their career in HR or they're sort of early on in their career? What advice would you have to anyone who's looking at progressing and maybe achieving some of the things you've done?
I would probably give two pieces of advice. Firstly, grab every opportunity that is presented to you to grow within an organization. You might not think it's important, and it might not be important at the time, but what it will give you is a skill that you didn't expect to potentially have. So that goes back to the bit that I was talking about projects, about grabbing the opportunity to widen your skill set. And the other thing is, don't be afraid to make a decision. You might only be early on in your career. Decisions are something that we learn from and that we grow from. Talk your decision-making process through with your line manager, but don't be afraid to come up with a suggestion about a decision. Even if it doesn't go well, you will learn from it. And if you're in the right kind of organization, they will learn and grow from it as well. So they'd be the two things that I would suggest.
Fantastic. I'm going to ask you one final question then. Is there one common myth about HR that you'd like to dispel?
Yeah, I think there is. I've heard, certainly normally when I've just started at a business, that HR are the blockers for everything. And actually, if you've got a good HR team working with you, HR find a way to break down the barriers to put in place the right things that your business needs, not just the nice to haves, but the things that really make a difference. So I don't think we're blockers, I think we're builders.
Fantastic. Well, that half an hour or so just whistle through there. So now, if anyone would like to reach out to you, what would can they do that? And if so, what's the best way of doing so?
Yeah, just look me up on LinkedIn. Happy to connect.
Fantastic. Well, a massive thank you to Natasha Hanson for taking part in this episode. I hope the listeners have enjoyed it, and stay tuned for future episodes. Thanks,
Phil. Thanks, Phil.